Welcome to IMAX Recap. Today, I will show you a survival thriller film from 2010 titled 127 Hours. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. On April 26, 2003, 27-year-old Aron Ralston, played by James Franco, hiked through the Utah Gorge. He is alone and has told no one about his trip. An experienced mountaineer, he collects the most beautiful peaks in the region. However, at the end of a remote canyon, the unthinkable happens. Above him, a boulder breaks off and traps his arm against the rocky wall of the canyon. He is trapped, threatened by dehydration and hypothermia, and is plagued by hallucinations. He thinks about his ex-girlfriend and her family and wonders if the two girls he met in the canyon just before his accident will be the last people he ever sees. 5 days later, realizing that help is not coming, he is faced with the most serious decision of his life. But what was that decision? To understand why and how events unfolded, let's go back to where it all began. Aron Ralston, an engineer and experienced mountaineer, spends his weekends exploring different parts of America. An experienced mountaineer, he collects the most beautiful peaks in the region. On a Friday evening in April 2003, he decided to explore Blue John Canyon without telling anyone around him about his plans. Once there, and after a night's rest, he got on his bike and set off on the deserted tracks and roads of the canyonlands. Leaving his bike behind, he continues on foot. He meets two lost young women, Christy and Megan, and decides to accompany them. After spending a few hours with them, Aron leaves them and continues his solitary excursion. However, deep in a remote canyon, the unthinkable happens. While descending a slot canyon, Ralston takes a wrong step and leans on an unstable rock. The rock topples under the weight of the hiker and falls with him down the fault, trapping his right arm against the wall of a rock face, under a stone that he cannot move. He was trapped, threatened by dehydration and hypothermia, and was hallucinating. The rock was about 1 meter wide and weighed about 75 kilograms. His water supply was low, and no one knew where he was. Aron tried for many minutes to pull his arm out with all his might and then move the heavy rock, but both failed. Exhausted by his efforts, Ralston decides to drink from his canteen, but soon realizes that he must save his water. When he pulls out all his items and thinks of a way out, he pulls out his watch with his teeth, not without difficulty. Realizing that he is alone in the middle of nowhere, he decides to take an inventory of all the equipment he has brought, watch, water pouch, digital camera, and grabs the multi-purpose knife to cut the rock and knock it down. He continues this task during the night to keep warm and ties a strap around the stone, which he attaches to another rock. He tries to sleep, but to no avail. Aron spent several hours trying to free himself from under the rock that had trapped him, using every tool at his disposal, his penknife, the rope from his rucksack. But none of these efforts bore fruit. The day dawns, and the sun floods the canyon, bringing back old childhood memories with his father. Aron begins to film himself with his camera, recounting his misadventures and delivering messages to his loved ones. After believing for a moment that someone was near him and could rescue him, the climber realizes that he will have to remain lucid to avoid falling into despair. As night fell, and after covering himself this time to face the cold, he showed the first signs of hallucinations. The following day, with all the ropes and carabiners in place, Aron tried to lift the stone with his arm and then with his feet, but without success. He keeps his logbook with the camera and announces unhappy findings. The severe lack of water, decreasing by the hour, will force him to drink his urine. Even if someone arrived, they would not help him. There was a good chance he would bleed to death before getting medical attention. He decided that it was better for the rescuers to think he was dead. In this state of mind, he tried to commit suicide by stabbing himself in the chest with his knife. But he remembered something an old girlfriend had once said to him. She had once said that suicide was cowardly because it went against God's will. So now facing certain death, Aron remembered his words and decided not to give up. He would use his body as a gift and escape. This led him to conclude that committing suicide was not much different from staying put. So why commit such an act? However, he accidentally opened an artery when he pulled the knife from his body. After losing too much blood and passing out, Aron woke up again by performing CPR on himself, with no significant results. He asked himself one question: how did I get here? After many hours of thinking and a million different scenarios, he came to a surprising conclusion. Since there was no chance of getting home on his own, he would need help to get down from there. This conclusion led to an even worse one. He knew now what he should do, but more importantly, he knew that it would probably be impossible for him to do it. The hard truth is that if someone doesn't find him in 8 hours, he will never find him. So it was at this point he managed to make a tough decision, to amputate his arm above the elbow with only a dull penknife. For his first attempt, and after using a tourniquet, he tried to slash his arm with the blade of his multi-purpose knife. But this did not help him. This freedom manifests itself to him with a crow he sees every day. After reminiscing about his parents and sister and then about Rana, his former girlfriend, Ralston is awakened by thunder and faces a torrential downpour. The narrowness of the canyon means that the water rises very quickly. Hence, he manages to lift the stone with the water and return to his van. When he arrives at Rana's house, he asks her for help, without getting any words out of his mouth. She shuts the door in his face. This vision turns out to be a dream. At daybreak, increasingly lucid, he imagines himself as a guest on an American talk show, where the presenter and one of the listeners ridicule him. He then realizes the seriousness of his mistake in not having given any indication of his excursion to his relatives, as the police search for his disappearance can only begin at a time when he will probably already be dead. When he comes to his senses, he seems to say goodbye to his parents, after telling them what was on his mind and apologizing. Aron then makes a second attempt to amputate after overcoming his anxiety by sticking the penknife into his arm. Still, he cannot continue, not breaking the bones with his tool. As night falls, he continues to slash the stone with his knife. Still, he is plagued by increasingly acute hallucinations, as if someone were spying on him. Then he sees various people the following morning, such as his family members, his friends, to whom he apologizes again, and Blue John, Butch Cassidy's sidekick who gave the canyon its name. At the end of his strength, Ralston gives his last thoughts to the camera. The raven has disappeared, and he sees it as a sign. He has reflected on everything that has happened to him since he was a child and interpreted this accident as a way of making amends to his loved ones, of redemption. He inscribes the words R.I.P. Aron Ralston, 1975 to 2003 on the rock face, like a tombstone if things go wrong for him. After 6 days and 5 nights of trying unsuccessfully to get unstuck and completely dehydrated, starving, and suffering from hypothermia, Ralston sees a small boy who appears to be his son at daybreak. This final hallucination will give him the courage to make the drastic decision to amputate his right arm for good. Unable to cut it off directly with his poor-quality, multi-purpose knife, worn out after its many uses, he uses the rock to crush its bones, then uses his knife as a dagger until he amputates himself, cutting flesh, muscles, blood vessels, and nerves, not without pain, for more than an hour. Finally free, he follows the rift and comes to a precipice, which he manages to abseil down with the help of his equipment and his only right arm. Aron started walking to his car 11 kilometers away. As his condition became more worrying, he met some hikers and was rescued. He is taken to the hospital by helicopter. The film's final minutes show the character swimming with one arm and meeting the real Aron Ralston with his wife and son born in February 2010. Aron Ralston continues to climb and mountaineer, but he always tells his family where he plans to go. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.